Hello, 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 and welcome to today's therapy deck, or slide deck, therapy for speech sound disabilities. This is my thinking behind putting this to this deck together. I guess I think one thing that can too easily happen is you have a class like this one that's like an overview of all these speech sound disabilities, and you kind of have this like intellectual understanding to the best of your ability of all this stuff, but it still doesn't really help you know what to do in therapy. I mean, sometimes we have touched on it. Um, but I wanted to just go a little deeper and touch on it a little more, like actual stuff you can do in therapy. Optimally, in my mind, you would first have this class, and then you would have a clinic where you would get hands-on practice with these different speech sound disabilities. But I know that is not how things are set up. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time and just a little deeper into like specifically focusing on some specific therapy stuff. So hopefully that is helpful. And the ubiquitous, tricky sound is where I'm going to begin. Uh, and it's tricky because with you generally can't see what is going on inside of your mouth. Some sounds it's easier because you see what's going on with the lips and visual things, but is trickier. Um, it's going back several weeks, but we did talk about some stuff like the difference between traditional artic therapy, where you're shaping in isolation and then moving on to like syllables and words, etc., etc. Um, and there's that variation of the traditional is the tongue hump and then and then there's the other way to do the where you lick the top of your mouth roof and pull your tongue back and go lur. So yes, we've gone over those ways to shape uh, but I wanted to just focus a little bit more on and some stuff you can do. So one is to use a mouth puppet, and you'll see the mouth puppet, Mr. Mouth, a few slides from now. So I will point him out, but I don't think you'll know who he is. But you can use a puppet, in other words, that kind of puppet to show kids what is going on with the tongue. Um, it's the kind of thing where your fingers actually go into the tongue of this puppet, and you can make the hump on the R, and they can make the hump on the R, for example, and so they can see what's going on with the tongue using Mr. Mouth's tongue. I mean, another way to do that kind of thing is to draw pictures of mouths and like draw pictures of a tongue making like a hill or a mountain. Uh, and then some activities you could do in terms of like in isolation is the growling dog activity, where you pretend, to be a large dog guarding a bone and you're going and the kid's going and I mean, given my personality, you can certainly like crawl around on the floor with a kid and pretend to be dogs. I don't Why not go and also let yourself bark and howl if you want to and just play dog? But part of playing dog is making the sound. Uh, Another thing that's like another sound thing is a race car. I mean, this one I was particularly thinking, especially when people have what we call W for R. Some people will have schwa, for and other people will have w for But anyway, a race car, you're pretending to make a race car, revving up a race car sound, and of course, you could literally have little cars and be playing with race cars. And while you're doing that, you have them pay attention. Like, what is going on when we say er? For one thing, tongue tension. Like, it's got a lot of tongue tension. Well, another thing I do, it's not on the slide because I'm thinking of it now. For is like squeeze your fists because it is almost like it almost feels like you're making a fist with your tongue when you're practicing So tight tongue. Like, what's going on with your lips? Because with W for R, your lips are rounded. Whoa, whoa, whoa. For your lips aren't rounded. They're more like that. Jaw stability. I mean, the best thing I think is to have them feel their jaw under their fingers. You might want to try it while you're listening to me, like versus whoa, 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 whoa. Your jaw is not in the same place. Um, so that, you're playing, but you're also helping them notice how things are different in their mouth to shape those sounds. Uh, and another thing is just playing with character voices. Pirates, are. Lions also go, and you might want to go, roar. Monsters go, so, play around with characters, play around with your tongue while you're being in character and see what it sounds like, see what it feels like. I think an underlying theme here is play. Um, I think it's best to make therapy as fun as you can. So don't think like drill sergeant energy or like none with a ruler hitting kids on a hand if they get the sound wrong energy because they don't like that. Think fun and play. I mean, one thing I will certainly say from all those years in the public schools and a clinic, it's going to be a lot easier for you if the kids like you and they want to see you and they have fun with you. You've got to pull them out of class, or maybe they got pulled away from TV or something like that to come to you. So you want to, life is a game in the world of children. Just think about fun and play, and you might realize it's drill in terms of multiple repetitions, but it shouldn't feel like drill to them. It should feel like play. Another one for is called the gargoyle technique. You might have to teach them what a gargoyle is, hence the picture. But it's like make your tongue strong like a stone gargoyle. So you're pulling it back, you're tightening the sides, you're holding tension. And if you do that right now, you can feel like there is that intensity to a tongue. Because what happens with a lot of kids that have trouble, this would especially be with the kids, but it could be for as much, is the reason that they're not pronouncing the is they don't have enough uh, lingual tension. In other words, they don't have enough tension in their tongues. Moving on to s, because that's another ubiquitously worked on sound. I mean, instead of a growling dog or a lion, you can be a snake, right? And you can be snakes together. You can get plastic snakes and play with a snake. You can make a snake out of paper. You can try to be the longest snake sound in the world. So, like, how long can you hold the sound? So snakes first, right? Uh, and then snake versus tire. So this is especially like for a frontal lisp. A frontal lisp is essentially somebody's making an unvoiced TH sound for an S sound. So the snake is going s, and the flat tire is going s. And you're like, okay, I'm listening to the difference between them. I'm paying attention to what's going on with where is my tongue when I'm doing them. So that's like snake versus tire. Um, Deflating a balloon. So you can pretend that let's blow up the balloon, big, 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 and then we got to make it shrink. Uh, oops. Air laser, that's more particularly for our lateral lisp. So just a reminder, the frontal lisp is the TH. The lateral lisp is when people, which I don't see anywhere near as often, as when and it's trickier to work on, and then the sounds, the sides of the tongue are coming up too far on the side, so it's more like, so with a laser beam, is very focused. But with if you're doing a lateral lisp, more like you can feel air come out the sides of your mouth. So you would have them, if they do that, have them put their fingers there and feel the air. And also that kind of air would move a tissue or move a feather. And so they get the idea of like a focused, pull the tongue in and a focused air stream. They'd be able to feel the difference um, in what's going on with their air, excuse me, playing air laser. So, I mean, kind of a general note about this Arctic stuff is when you're eliciting a sound, I mean, these are just a sampling of techniques you can use. There's a whole bunch of them out there. The activity does not matter as much. Basically, you want it to be the activity that works the best and that they like to do. But I mean, and not I mean, different ones will work better for different kids, but what really matters is that you get lots and lots and lots of repetitions in it. Do you know what I mean? So if the game is to make that sound, you don't make it once, you make it 10 times, and keep the kid engaged. And we'll return to apraxia again, but I just wanted to do the reminder in terms of apraxia. It's even more multiple repetitions. In this case, it's repetitions of a sound movement pattern for apraxia than it is for listening to the sound. But with both our traditional and articulation therapy and apraxia therapy, lots of repetition is the key to how you want to be working. So a couple other things that I did with traditional art therapy and other things. You can do this with apraxia therapy and stuff too. I want to just show you two toys that I used to use. One is the dice dude, and you shake his die. Let's just say we're at the syllable level now, and I have to say sa. Okay. Well, shake the dice dude's head. My turn. How many times do I have to say sa? I got a 8. Sa, 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 sa. So there's an element of play and surprise in it. It's not just like an adult assigning you the amount of times you're playing with a dice dude who is somewhere between wacky and creepy, but anyway, he exists. And then another thing I did, which was it was a hit, but I have to admit it does depend on a little bit your personality. Like this might not fit your personality, but like is to play with a play toilet, and then it's this thing. It's kind of like Russian roulette. When you pull the lever, you have to like open the toilet up and the water's in there, and then when you pull the lever, you never know when you're going to get sprayed. Because sometimes it doesn't, right? And so it could be that you practice the word or the sound 5, 10, no, five's not much, 10 times, for example, or the sound in a sentence and say the sentence 10 times, and then pull the lever, right? And so there definitely are kids who don't really want to get splashed in the face with toilet water, but most kids like to see most kids like to see their SLP get splashed in the face with toilet water, right? So but depending on the kid, I would take turns, like your turn, my turn. Let's see who gets splashed in the face, or I just get them to do the artic work, and every time they do it, they don't know whether or not I'm going to get splashed in the face. So I guess like let's just say I'm at a word level now, and we're working on S clusters, and I have to say school 10 times. So. School, 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 school. And then I'm gonna take my glasses off in case I get splashed, because I'll get water over my glasses. And then I pull the lever. And did you hear it? It even makes a flashing sound. And lucky for me, I didn't get splashed, right? But if we kept playing it, before long, I'd get toilet water all over my face. So I don't suggest, I know this is not the right kind of thing for everybody. This reflects my personality as well to play with the toilet. But and I don't suggest you show up like the first day of your internships with a plastic toilet saying, "Hey, I got a good idea." Like you might have internship supervisors that are less wacky than I am. I have a tendency to be wacky, but I mean, even if it's too much for you, and like I'm not doing that with a kid, but because it actually grosses me out. You don't have to, of course, but do try to think in terms of fun. But anyway, that's another toy you can play with. Um, in our tick therapy is the play toilet. Um, so like once you're at the word and sentence level. Then there's like tons of commercially available stuff, tons. And I think anybody's site, internship, school, clinic, whatever, they're going to own a lot of these things. So just kind of for you to know, there are things like card-based games, like matching games, memory games. There's board games, there's our Tick Bingo and the Candyland style games. There's scene-based activities like I Spy and like sound-loaded pictures where there's pictures that are going to have tons of S sounds hidden in them. There's story-based materials like sentence generation cards, story starter, stuff like that. And of course, in the world we live in, there's tons of digital materials. There's something called boom cards, which you might want to look up online. You want to see what those are. All kinds of interactive games, digital flashcards, etc. So there's tons of um, not so much when you're working on shaping and the sound in isolation and the sound with the syllable and all that. But once you get beyond that, there's a lot of games. And the other option is just to take traditional games and adapt them yourself to artic therapy, Candyland, Jenga, whatever. Um, the other thing is I would suggest is this is a place where ChatGPT is pretty good. So ChatGPT can give you suggestions about how to play and do artic therapy and how to make it'll make materials for you. So I think once you get to that point in the process, it's actually easier. Um, Another thing that was one of my specialties was to integrate creative writing with articulation therapy. I mean, also language therapy, everything basically. Integrate creative writing and songwriting with everything is kind of that's who I am. But I used to do that a lot with kids. And then it's like a project-based thing where the kid isn't just coming to speech, but they're making a book. And in the end, they have a book, like print it, publish it, give it to the parents. Look what your kid is. Your kid is not just coming to speech therapy. Your kid is an author, and this is the book they wrote. This is the book they made. So I'll show you a few examples from that. Um, so this would be like the table of contents of a book. This literally is the table of contents of a book with a kid I used to work with. You might notice I like The Best Robot doesn't have anything. Those were not Arctic poems, but we started to just write poems while he was working on sounds and isolation, sounds and syllables when we weren't yet ready to focus on. Um, the sounds he was working on a sentence or a poem level. Because I'm not, sometimes you know, this especially was in a free clinic where people came for 45 minutes. 45 minutes of Artic therapy is a bit much. So you don't necessarily work on Artic the whole time, okay? But once we got to the Artic, then one of his sounds was ch. So you can see the ch poems that they're organized with ch in the beginning position, ch in the middle position, and ch at the end. So we have Chewbacca chews and Chewbacca is mad for the beginning position. Also, this was a kid that was obsessed with Star Wars, and so we used his interests. Also, lunches for the middle, and then my coach for the end. Similar pattern here. We were working on j and we were working on th. So jelly beans, pajamas, the judge, and the fudge. And I just made a note for the parents, even though there isn't a j sound at the end of judge and fudge. I mean, even though there isn't a J letter at the end of judge and fudge, the j sound is at the end of those words because this is the thing that is makes you go blah, 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 about English is that it's not always spelled the way it sounds, right? And then the last three were all the TH, Thorn, the Python, and Mr. Mouth. So I'll show you examples of a couple of the poems that he wrote so you can see. Again, he was a Star Wars fanatic, wrote a poem about Chewbacca. Chewbacca chews meat. Chewbacca, well, I should read the title, shouldn't I? Chewbacca chews. Chewbacca chews meat. Chewbacca chews leaves. Chewbacca chews alien food. Chewbacca chews his own tongue. Chewbacca doesn't chew gum. Chewbacca doesn't chew sandwiches. Chewbacca doesn't chew his weapons. Chewbacca doesn't chew R2D2. So you can see you get a lot of practice in this poem. I mean, the way that I did it is that they say it and I write it down. Okay, so I didn't really get into the process here because I was showing you examples, but the kid says it, I take dictation and type it up, and often then we revise it. And I'll also let the kid tell me I'm wrong. Like, I didn't say that, I don't like that because they don't remember anymore, but yeah, kid, that is really what you said. I don't do that. I'm like, okay, I made a mistake. How should we fix it? But you end up with a poem um, with a bunch of ch. So that was ch in the beginning, and here is th in the middle. Uh, the python. The python doesn't bite Captain Ethano. The python doesn't swallow Captain Ethano. The python didn't scare Captain Ethano. The python didn't eat jelly beans. The python didn't drink juice. The python slithered into the pothole of doom. And last but not least, there is the famous Mr. Mouth, which um, I found him honestly a little bit creepy, but he is used a lot in therapy, and you do put your fingers in that tongue and make him. It works well for some things because you can easily like make a tongue hump shape for the conventional R, and if I put the tongue forward to show the difference between th and s. But for me, the weird thing about Mr. Mouth is like he can't close his lips. Like so everything really is like this. And if you had to work on a tongue or the lip closure, it wouldn't make any sense. Plus, he gets dirty and anyway. But Mr. Mouth. Mr. Mouth is a mouth. Mr. Mouth doesn't have a face. Mr. Mouth doesn't have a head. Mr. Mouth doesn't have a body. Mr. Mouth bites Jim. Mr. Mouth bites his toothbrush. Mr. Mouth bites the chair. But Mr. Mouth doesn't bite Dylan. So the kid's name who wrote the poem is Dylan. And I mean, I literally let him bite me with Mr. Mouth, right? And I literally let Mr. Mouth bite the chair. Like, go ahead and play. But we end up with a final TH or a final unvoiced TH, Mr. Mouth poem. Okay. So now I'm shifting from just a little bit of example, shifting away from traditional articulation therapy to facilitative context therapy. And that was when you are doing things like using a k or a g before the sound to help shape it. So you're not starting with in isolation, but you're starting at the word level. So literally, it was a kid who came to therapy and wore Crocs and put things in the holes of his Crocs. So this excerpt of a poem is really just a kid describing his Crocs, but since there's a k before and he was able to make a in Crocs, there we go. I have two pairs of Crocs. My Crocs have a lot of holes. I put decorations in their holes. I put fluff balls, surfboards, and dolphins in the holes of my Crocs. So, and continuing on with facilitative context, there's this software out there that it's been a while since I had access to it, but I know it still exists. That is it's facilitative context and nonsense words. So you can get on it, and there's like big long list of nonsense words, and then you're listening for what is the context in which the child is making the sound based on what came before it, or whatever sound you're working on. But is always the most common, right? And so this was a girl I was working at, and what she liked to do was create characters. And there was kind of like you know, science fiction story kind of characters. So, like a couple of nonsense words in the Sat Pack were Gear Cap and Zar Zoop, but she turned Gear Cap and Zar Zoop into characters. So we made like little character descriptions, and she was an artist girl. She liked to draw, so she would like if she'd go home one week and draw a picture of Gear Cap and bring it back in to show me, and another week draw a picture of Zarzoop at home and bring it in to show me. So it was kind of an ongoing. It allowed her to be creative and have fun with the drawing too. I mean, I do drawing in therapy with kids, but you can't like spend 20 minutes out of 30 drawing a picture. So sometimes if people are going to do more elaborate drawings, and they love to do it, they can do it at home and bring in. So for example, Gear Cap. He is from the planet Zarzup, which was another nonsense word from Satpack. He likes coffee. I should say his superpowers are that he can become invisible and use his psychic powers. And then Zarzoop, he comes from the planet Garzoop, which was another, nonsense word from the Satpack. He is an evil villain and likes vampire bats. He is part bat and can shoot lightning out of the tip of his wings when he's mad. So another facilitative context uh, material thing, there's this whole set of like matching cards that are called the entire word of R, and there'll be different decks with different vowel sounds. So there'll be like a deck that's got like a O before an R, and all many different vowel sounds. What I really found ubiquitously is the vowel that seems to shape R the most and the best is a long I before the R. So this was what it is we would first play the cards and play matching games with the cards, and the child was could do the R words in the cards, and then we're like he would pick which cards he wanted to make a poem out of. So this is how his an excerpt from his poem that was in a facilitative context with I. To iron an iron would be hard by Quincy. It would be hard for each iron to iron another iron while they are ironing clothes. When all the clothes are all ironed, they go to Ireland because Iris lives there and she is the queen of irons. So and then, moving a little bit from R to S and taking out of this book, frontal lisp, lateral lisp, which is all about how to work on lisps in a facilitative context. In this case, for a frontal lisp, often a T before an S helps shape the S because it helps get the tongue ready for an S. Okay, and so there are phrases in this book that you can practice. So we were practicing lists of phrases, and then I let the kid pick which phrase he wanted to make a poem out of. So there's agency, there's choice. He wanted to use the phrase oats and corn. So this is an excerpt from Devin's poem, Oats and Corn. For breakfast, we eat oats and corn. For lunch, we don't eat oats and corn. We eat snails. For an after-school snack, we don't eat oats and corns. We eat wet frogs. When we wake up in the middle of the night, we eat oats and corn. So you can kind of see that creating poems gives multiple repetitions with the sound. And they're working on it while they're writing it. They read it to you, they read it to their parents, etc., etc. So hopefully that gives you a glimpse of creative writing and artic therapy. And now we're going to shift over from artic therapy to the linguistic-based therapy, the phonological process therapy. And so the shift has more to do with thinking, how we're thinking, what we're targeting, than it does exactly materials. So with articulation games, you want to create opportunities for productions, as many productions as possible. And they're thinking about the sound of it and being able to hear the sound of what they're doing. With linguistic based therapy, you can use games, but you're thinking about different things. So you're either thinking about contrasts, like how T and C make two different words, and or overcoming patterns, such as fronting when it's like tar for car, or cluster reduction when it's like poon for spoon, using a cycles approach. So um, a lot of times you can use the same or similar materials, memory games, bingo games, story activities, etc. But you have to realize that you're using them for different therapeutic purposes. So the question isn't what game should I use? It's how can this activity highlight the sound contrast I'm teaching or the sound pattern we're working on? That's the shift from artic into like linguistic based intervention. You could use the same game for two different kinds of artic therapy, but you need to be the one who's aware that you're not working on the same thing. So, I mean, a couple other just specific things aside from using games differently that you might do when you're doing like linguistic based therapy. If you're using a contrast approach, there's a lot of commercially available things for that too, especially around minimal pairs, which is the T and C. There's matching cards, there's minimal pair bingo, there's all kinds of stuff. But a couple of little things you can do is you can play sound change machine. And it's you pretend to be a machine yourself that can change words. So, okay, we're going to change cat into hat, or cat into cap, or cat into cab. And you play that you're a machine doing this thing, but you're also, oh, what changed? how are those different? In this case, it was all different final sounds, right? Um, and it could be like we're changed cat into uh, cack. Like cack. There's no such thing as cack. Reject down the chute. Like the machine didn't do the right job unless a word comes out. But I mean, all of those are things you can figure out. But pretending to be a machine, in other words, a sound changing machine. Other things, silly mix-ups. So you make mistakes on purpose and you have kids fix them. And you can do that yourself or you can do it with a puppet. Like if you were working on stopping, when a child has the phonological process of stopping sounds and would say like ton because it's a stop for sun. And the puppet will say, the ton is hot today. And the child will be like, wrong. No, you got it wrong. The sun is hot today. And then, that's right. Okay, let's practice it 10 times each. The puppet will say it, then you say it. The sun is hot today. And the kid says, the sun is hot today. Generally speaking, children like to correct adults. It corrects the power imbalance, so it's fun. So whether they're correcting you or you're being a puppet and they're correcting the character, often being silly, making mistakes on purpose, and then letting the child correct it, it can be a fun way for kids to work on sounds. Other things like build a sentence or make a story, like we have a set of words. So if it was contrast, you'd be using minimal pairs, it was T and C. It's like I went on a boat to sea and drank a cup of tea. And if it's a cycles approach, then it's whatever you're working on. Like if you're working on fronting, um, and really, since they front, you're going to want to work on sounds with k and g. So you would be using words that start with k and g and making like building sentences, making up stories with those words. Also sorting tasks. So you could like sort words that start with T or K and be like, oh, that's right. Sometimes I say t when I need to say k. And so which is which? And you might use a bag and put the t words in one bag and the k words in another bag. And then a related task are categorization tasks. So it would be like finding all the different words that start with a t or a k. And one way you could do that is to use books. Like look at a kid's book, look at every page and like, okay, let's find the words that start with that letter and then say them, practice them, heightening the awareness of that stuff. So shifting now over to apraxia. So some of the same stuff that I've used before. I mean, for example, my toilet works fine for apraxia, right? They could do multiple repetitions with a toilet. It's just that again, you are aware that you're shifting your focus, and so. Um, Apraxia therapy should kind of feel differently because you're not working on the sounding correctly. You're working on planning and sequencing movements, and often you're going to need a lot of cueing. So kids often will need to be able to like watch your mouth and see what you're doing. There's other kinds of cueing you could do as well, but um, so think like this. Articulation is about the accurate sound. The phonological linguistic-based therapy is either about meaningful contrasts, T and C, or working on sound patterns like fronting and cluster reduction, etc. Apraxia is working on accurate movement sequences. And then some specific things you might do for apraxia rather than just adapting the stuff we've already talked about with that in mind. There's like robot programming where you pretend to be a robot and there's a speech code and it could be like the robot needs to say me, my, mo, and then, okay, you try it, me, my, mo, and even doing like this towards the mouth directs them to look at your mouth while you're doing it. And as they can do it, then the skills could get that could get longer. It could get all the way to me, my, mo, more, mine. But what they're focusing on is not so much the sound of it, but what's going on in your mouth. Also, Simon Says, which can be adapted to lots of kind of therapy, but you know, think of that with apraxia therapy. It could be Simon Says, say me. Simon Says, say my. Um, and as they get more, depending on how severe it is or how they're advancing, it can get more complex. So it could be longer sounds like me, my, moo, but it could also be, touch your nose while saying me, you know, wiggle your ears. Simon Says, wiggle your ears while saying my. A couple examples. Dysarthria, at this point in the summer, dysarthria is starting to feel like ancient history, but in terms of this class, I mean, I know that it was addressed a bit way back when the same week with like the oral peripheral exam, and I'll just be honest, since I don't know exactly how other classes are taught. I'm guessing that when you get to adult language disorders, they're going to talk to you more about adult apraxia and adult dysarthria. And here we're talking to you more about child apraxia and child dysarthria. In many ways, that it'll be similar, right? Because it's the same disability. But in other ways, you don't want to work with adults in a way that infantilizes them. So they might not want you to like play kiddie games. And I'm focusing right now more on like a child who has dysarthria. So a thing that we want to keep in mind when working with dysarthria is the child already knows what they want to say and they already know how to plan it. So it's not an apraxia planning thing. The issue is executing the movements with enough strength, range, timing, coordination, respiratory support, because dysarthria is going to be much more physically based and having the physical capacity to say things. So for dysarthria, the focus is not on fine-tuning sound. The focus is on functional communication. Okay, so depending on the kid, you might sometimes work on specific sounds in service of intelligibility. What you want the a person with dysarthria to be is as best understood as possible given their physical limitations. But I remember working with a kid with dysarthria, and he also omitted s at the beginning of words. So I remember working on school with him, so that can happen. I mean, it feel like the dark ages to you. I'm sure they don't make these things anymore because it's way before the internet era. But they used to have these machines called language masters that you put a strip through it and it could record exactly one word, and that word would be school. So we would practice it with a machine. So yeah, you might do that with dysarthria, but usually it's more at a bigger level and it's about trying to be understood as best as possible. And all of this is going to have to do with what the kid can physically do. So if you're like, showing you a couple of games, but like if the child is like physically incapable of progressing with this, then it's not something you would do for too long, okay? But if they're physically capable of getting better, there's things like the announcer game where you pretend to be a sports announcer, a parade announcer, a circus announcer, race announcer, and you're practicing really like as clear as possible speech, like here comes the race car, the elephant is winning, you're targeting more vocal intensity, respiratory support. So you might have to instruct somebody to inhale through their nose and take a breath before the elephant is winning. So they've got enough breath to say it. Phrase length, if they're able to keep doing this with longer and longer phrases, that's a little bit of analogous to like if you're building up muscles at the gym that you would um, over time do more and more reps or increase the weight to stronger weights. Another one is the voice thermometer. So you just draw a simple thermometer and you like, instead of temperature, like you put voice things like this is a whisper, conversation, classroom, playground, stadium, and they can practice adjusting the intensity of their voice to different situations. Um, I've done that too with some kids who were working on more like they didn't have any kind of speech issues, but pragmatically they tend to um, talk way too loud all the time. It was really more of a pragmatic issue. So I've used the voice thermometer in more than one circumstance. Um, there's challenges like the one breath challenge. How much can you say on a breath? So my dog ran, and then as you get more and more down there, my dog ran across the playground. My dog ran across the playground chasing a squirrel. But, if they couldn't get all the way, it might be, my dog ran across the playground. And you would see where they run out of breath, and you're just trying to practice a little more breath support to get further and further along the phrase. um, Actor speech. These are like activities for over articulation. So actors, really actually bad actors is a better way to put it. Bad actors might do this kind of thing, like, because you can, those actors that you can tell they're acting and it doesn't seem natural. But kids can pretend to be a movie star, a king, a news reporter, a storyteller. But the idea is that you are using very precise movement so that people can understand you very well. Um, Similar to this kind of stuff are things like robot mouth, where you pretend to be a robot and every movement has to be big enough for the robot to detect. So if you're slurring your words too much, the robot can't understand. But if you're not slurring your words, the robot understands. Of course, you don't want them walking around talking like robots, but in spontaneous speech, but they don't want to do it and they won't do it anyway. So then this is just practice with over articulation. Also, detective listening, which could be bad telephone or internet connection listening. But detective listening is like you have to solve the mystery, so every word has to be clear. Kind of any activity where you get a child to over articulate and articulate more precisely than they are if they've got slurry speech. Uh, Now I'm having a memory of I used to live in Madrid and I used to teach English there, and I only spoke English at work. So I mean, in my with my daily life, I always spoke Spanish, and so back though, there's weren't cell phones. So like to call your parents, you would have to go to the telephone building to make an international call. But I remember like I would call them and it would be like, "Hi, mom and dad, this is Jim," and they would laugh at me because how weird I was talking. But I just got used to like slowing down and over articulating my English for my students so they could understand it. A bit of that kind of work is good for dysarthria. So now we're really shifting away from all that kind of stuff into phonological awareness. And as you may recall, phonological awareness is really more the bridge between speech and language and literacy. So we're really not in speech turf anymore, even though it's a speech sound class, but we're in the middle zone. And so phonological awareness activities should really feel more like language games, not like speech drills, because children here aren't practicing how to talk. They're practicing how to think about the sound structure of language, and you're focusing on metalinguistic skills. In other words, metalinguistic skills just means thinking about language, like consciously thinking about language. Is this a noun? Is this a verb? But so these are metalinguistic skills that are going to help support reading, spelling, and literacy development. So, and there's several of ones you can work on. So I mean, a couple examples here. Rhyming. So rhyming activities, I'm going to say three words to rhyme. Which one is the imposter? Cat, hat, dog. And they have to figure out which one doesn't rhyme. And you might recall that uh, a child who can't do this and before print based, when other kids can do it, is an early indicator that the child is may end up becoming dyslexic. Okay. Silly rhyming restaurant. So you're having cat soup, hat soup, bat soup. There can also be nonsense word soup. You could have, jat soup. What's that? So you just get silly, and children tend to like nonsense and silliness. Um, Also, rhyming with either playing basketball or tossing a ball back or rolling a ball back. A lot of kids, and if you're me, adults as well, are not good at sitting still. So this is can get some like movement into the thing. So, I have the ball, I say cat, I throw it to you. You think of a rhyming word and say hat. Kids who can't do it, you might whisper the word, you might have words written down, but the idea is that you're practicing rhyme while tossing balls back and forth, doing something physical. Syllable stomp. So you stomp your feet once per syllable. In other words, dog, one stomp. Elephant, elephant, three stomps. Um, Syllable ninja would be like ninja chops. So, there'd be three for ba, na, na. So you get physical with these things. Oh, here we go. Initial sound activities. Um, Alliteration is also the word for when the first sounds in words are the same. Sound hunt. So you find objects in the room that start with the same sound. Uh, while I was putting these slides together, I was remembering this song. I didn't write it, but there was this CD back in the era of CDs called Mouth Music that was for like songs for speech therapy. And it was like, going on a sound hunt today, going on a noise hunt today. I did used to sing that with kids, but I can't find it. I can't find it on YouTube, so we'll have to write a new one. But for example, you're looking for things that start with an M. Sound spy is very similar, but instead of a sound hunt, you're being a detective. I spy something that starts with a S. You're working on being able to identify initial sounds in words. Phoneme segmentation, um, there's sound figures. So, oh, how many sounds in the word cat? At. And I think if you think about it, you could adopt a lot of things. Like if they love to be ninjas, you could be at, however you want to do it, but playing while segmenting. Sound hopscotch, so that would be like one hop per sound. So cat would have three hops. At, and you know, at, like that. Ship also would be three hops. So think about that, and you could be like, okay, it's sh, but you're like, huh, cat's got three sounds and three letters, but ship has four letters, but only three sounds because the sh is making one sound. So those are the kind of activities that you're working on while you're playing. And, it doesn't have to be a hop or a finger or a karate chop. I also did this with jumping jacks, with opposite knee touches, where you have your elbow and you touch the opposite knee across midline. All kinds of stuff where you don't have to you're not trapped in a chair. You can move around while it's almost like articulation, or, well, it's not articulation, phonological awareness aerobics. Uh, Phoneme blending then is the reverse of that, and that's when I'm saying s, n, and you have to say sun. So that could be like a secret agent message because the message isn't blended yet. So like, what's gonna be our snack today? K, k, z. What's that? Cookies. Oh, yeah, like that. Similar locked treasure chest. So there's a treasure chest, but it's got like a secret code to open it, and it's a word. Can you figure out what it is? D, g. And they have to put it together and say dog in order to unlock the treasure. Oh, that might be it. Yeah, I think that's it. So, hopefully that's helpful to you. I mean, I know it's kind of just dipping our toes in many different kinds of therapy, but I just wanted to give you some specific stuff that you can do, and hopefully that's helpful. And big theme there is as much as possible, because of course there's going to be moments where it's frustrating because they're working on something new and they can't do it yet, or it's not easy to do. But as much as possible, try to make things fun. All right, take care.